of CELTA Tutor Trainer and Training. Yeah. So this is week 14. Again, I'm recording these after I had a bit of a vacation because I was mentally drained. So let me refer to my notes for this part. So week 14 was similar to all the other weeks. We had 2 input sessions on Tuesday morning, hour and a half each. And then on Thursday morning, we had TP5 for 1 candidate and TP6 for 2 other candidates. So input sessions, we started with error correction. And we were really looking at the type of mistakes that students make in our sessions or in our lessons or whatever you want to call them, classifying the mistakes and addressing the mistakes in the lesson and the types of techniques that you can use to address the mistakes. So session started out with some pair work activities, 2 questions regarding their own personal experience regarding error correction, because a lot of times we use similar techniques and ways of correcting our students that we had, whether they're successful or not, when we were learning second languages or foreign languages. So there's a bit of a discussion about that. And then the tutor introduced them to the terminology of mistake, error, slip, and attempt, elicited some ideas of how to define those, and then they had a matching activity. Let's see, after the matching activity, there was the board of the answers, went through and kind of clarified the difference between those. Then there was an activity where there was some mistakes, and the teachers had to classify what was the issue. So there was like a problem with word stress, a problem with intonation, a problem with word order, et cetera, et cetera. So they had some examples of things that students had produced, and they had to classify them. There was a discussion in some breakout rooms, and they came back to the main rooms. And they also discussed why that might happen. So this would kind of link into when we're thinking about the lesson planning process. When we have to anticipate problems, we have to think about what possible problems might happen and why those things might happen, so we can give some appropriate correction, I guess we could say. Then there was a activity with different situations and mistakes that learners had made, and there was a prompt of what would you do in each situation: correct on the spot, correct later as a form of delayed correction, or not correct at all. And that was done in breakout rooms, and so there was kind of a discussion about that. And yeah, and then the tutor gave kind of a flow chart on when to correct, which was quite interesting. I hadn't seen one done quite this way before, but I think the candidates found it to be useful. I don't know if I would find it to be useful. If I would find it to be useful, because I don't know. I think it depends on how like your brain works as a teacher, you know? So so I get the concept of it, and breaking it down made it a little bit more. Sorry, big truck going by. I think it made it a little more visual, but at the same time, this is not something that you can like whip out a flow chart and like go through it. So it was like this: is the error the target language? Yes, then you need to correct it. If it's not the target language, does it affect understanding? If yes, then correct it. If not, is it a reoccurrent or fossilized mistake? If yes, then correct it. If not, don't correct it. I mean, I think this is something that mentally we go through, but it happens so quickly in the classroom that I just don't have a lot of thought process behind it, I guess. Not that I don't think about the mistakes, but I just, yeah, using a flowchart makes it easier to kind of see when it would be appropriate, but at the same time, you have to be comfortable doing this kind of on the spot and making quick decisions. So I did read once. read or heard on the news that teachers make more decisions or as many decisions as surgeons do in the classroom when we're thinking about like dealing with students. And anyways, okay, so there's a lot of decision-making process. However it works for you, if a flow chart works, kind of visually organize it to decide whether or not you need to correct it or not, that's fine. But just know that in real life, in the classroom, you're going to have to make these decisions pretty quickly. And there should be some rationale behind it. Then we went into different techniques like repetition, reformulation, note-taking, self or peer correction, bunch of techniques, and when they're useful to use. And then the teachers had some suggestions on whether things were good practice or not a good practice. There was some conversation prompts, and they exchanged ideas in small groups. And at the end, there was a takeaway about, or there was a discussion about the takeaways from the session. Then, oh, I lied. I said that it was about, sorry. I said that it was about language awareness, but the second one was actually teaching one-to-one lessons. So they looked at the advantages and disadvantages of teaching one-to-one, considerations of teaching individuals, and needs analysis, which I'm a huge proponent of, and I spend a lot of time talking about it, either on my channel or with teacher training and mentoring. So like seeing other people's approaches to needs analysis. Anyways, the second session started about, there was a warm-up poll, how many teachers had experience teaching one-to-one. There was some discussion questions in the breakout room, challenges, and how teaching one-to-one differs from teaching groups. In the main room, they reflected on their own experience. They focused heavily on disadvantages of teaching one-to-one. Surprising to me, but okay. Then they moved to another activity to focus on advantages, disadvantages. There was a Jamboard activity. Yes. So then we went through kind of a list, boarded list of advantages, disadvantages. There's a brief discussion, some like anecdotal stories from the tutor, from the teachers, and then they were asked to build a list of things that they need to take into consideration. And this is where the idea of needs analysis was being introduced. The tutor did use something from Murphy, teaching one-to-one. There is like this chart thing. It has like when, where, who, how, what. So kind of guiding question underneath, there's bullet points, but guiding questions on information that you need to take into consideration when you first are getting to know your clients or your audience. And then they went into needs analysis and the needs analysis process. This was mostly kind of like lecture style. He covered the needs analysis process, information that would help guide them. And the final activity was to discuss the observations above, agree or disagree with them, provide personal scenarios. And then the session ended with some practical ideas for, hang on. Yep. So practical ideas for teaching students, like practical ideas for the classroom lessons. Yeah, it was a very broad stroke general introduction to needs analysis, because I mean, that's kind of what we have time for and what is appropriate for this level of course. So take with that what you will. Again, needs analysis for me is kind of like a sticking point, but it's fine. You know, I sit there and I'm like, you know, needs analysis, if you're teaching one-to-one, you have to do a very good needs analysis. Okay, so then TP5/TP6s. Some of the main issues that continue to arise, let's see, with the candidates. they're struggling to complete certain sections of the lesson plan. And I would say that by this point, TP5, TP6, they're at the end of the course. TP7, TP8, they're completely independent. They're not going to have any support in terms of scaffolding for them to receive kind of like step-by-step instructions of how they should set up their lessons and things like that. It's like pick your own material, justify why you're choosing that, kind of like off on your own. That's the scenario for TP7, TP8. So TP6, we would expect that they would be able to competently fill out all of the sections of the lesson plan, or at least make an attempt. And that's not what we're seeing with some of the candidates. Some of them are doing quite well, filling it out, and some of them are not. I think it has to do with organizational skills and time management than it has to do with their ability to actually complete a lesson plan. Why I keep harping on lesson plans is because if you don't spend the time to at least think about it prior to giving the lesson, I think a lot of the candidates, teachers in general, I would say, are so focused on the materials and the activities that they're not really thinking about the language analysis section. They're not really thinking about, do these activities support the stage that we're in, and if it does or does not, and how does this reflect, or how does this give evidence actually for if a student does a specific task or activity, how does this give evidence that I'm completing main aims or subsidiary aims, or, that this is a successful lesson or not. So I think that lesson planning in a course like this is necessary for you to reserve some time, organize yourself so that you're able to complete these sections. Because again, like I said in my previous video, we don't see your planning process 100%, right? We see parts of it and we get a lesson plan, and then we see what you do in class. So if that is a full, that's the best way that we can, without sitting down individually with everybody and going through their whole train of thought for the entire lesson, which is impractical and it's not going to happen for this type of course. We have to be able to see that you've at least thought about these things. One of the things that I felt was missing was, in general, from this week's teaching practice, was forward thinking, or a little bit of thinking about anticipating problems, and developing solutions for those anticipated problems, both with materials, time management, and with target language. It was just not really as well thought through as I would have liked it to have been. So I think that was kind of like the main focus for me, is that if you're not going to complete the lesson plan, okay, that's your prerogative, I would say. However, if you do go through the individual parts of the lesson plan, and you at least attempt to put down some ideas that are not copy and pasted from previous lesson plan. Because target language changes, skills change, materials change, so you can't really copy and paste a lot of some things. You could, but not for a lot of the language excuse me, a lot of the language stuff. So I think that is deeply reflected in the delivery of the lesson. So when you're giving a lesson and you're being observed, when students, if you have a Panellogy Presto and you live in Americana, be sure to use the trucks that go by, because they fix your Panellogy Presto. Hold on, we'll just wait for that to go by. Yes. So anyways, living in the interior of São Paulo, this is what we get. So I would say that it's deeply reflected in how you're giving the lesson. A lot of times the students will come up with questions and or commit there's some errors or mistakes that they're making in class, and the teachers are not handling it in an efficient way. I would say there's a lot of deviation from the lesson plan to address questions or to handle errors for error correction because it wasn't thoroughly thought through previously. So I would say my recommendation is that if you're doing a course like this, or if you're doing any type of course or giving lessons that are going to be observed, I mean, it's just kind of good general practice in general, you should do it. But if you, especially if you're being observed and you're being assessed for something like a course, or for something like if you're a coordinator of a school is going to be assessing you, you should think through your lesson and kind of play by play it in your head. And that will help you kind of to anticipate the problems, not just like the step-by-step procedure. Think about like, okay, I'm going to say this. What are my students probably going to say? And I know that sounds really neurotic. I do it a lot because I am neurotic, but it does help, you know, in the processing. It's not something that you have to like note down and write a novel for. No, but you can sit there for, I don't know, 30 minutes to an hour and just play by play. Like, I'm going to say this, like imagine the whole scenario in your head, and it will help you kind of anticipate some of the problems. So yeah, and I think that thinking time previously, I mean, we see lesson planning a lot of the times as like busy work, like we have to fill out all the different sections and write everything down. But lesson planning for me, there's a lot of just kind of thinking time where I just sit there and I think about, okay, well, this might happen, they might do that, and I just go like play by play through the lesson, and it's helpful for me, and I think it would be helpful for a lot of candidates. So especially in the anticipating problems and developing solutions that will not derail your lesson. Because if there's a question, you need to answer the question quickly and efficiently, and then get back onto the right track. So that would be my recommendation for this week. I'll be back next week with TP7s, and we'll see what happens then.